there, and welcome to Cansanity. It's a little chilly out there tonight, so I thought I would come inside and do the food prep for my meals that I'm going to make this weekend. I decided that what I'm going to make is a sirloin roast on the barbecue. And one of the things that I like to do whenever I cook a roast is I like to put a nice rub on it the night before so that the roast can tenderize a bit and absorb some of the flavors. Now, one of my favorite herbs to use with roast beef is rosemary, and so I love planting it in my garden. And now I did find the first couple of years that I planted rosemary that I was a bit disappointed because you pay quite a bit of money for a rosemary plant that was about maybe 6 or 8 inches, and you would grow it up all season, use it a bit in the fall, and then it would die if you left it out in your garden. It just wouldn't survive the winter. So what we have found works is to plant our rosemary plants in a 10 or 12 inch pot and leave it outside so that it'll get a really good frost in the winter, and that frost will tell the plant to go dormant. So the plant will go dormant, then you can bring it inside and put it in a window, and when you do that you can keep it actually over the winter in your house. And so this is a plant that we bought last year, and we overwintered it in the house, and when it started to get nice and sunny, we in the later part of the winter, we just took it out and let it get a little bit of sunshine to bring it out of dormancy. And so we start doing that around mid-January, end of January. And so we'll take it out for a little bit of sunshine, and then we'll bring it back in, and we'll do that for about 6 weeks before we actually leave it outside. And so as you can see, it is quite worth it to try to overwinter your rosemary. And so we'll buy a rosemary plant about every 3 years, and the first year we have it, we don't harvest too hard on it, but the second year after it's overwintered in the house, then we really use a lot of it. So in this roast, this rub that I put on the roast, what I do is I chop up 2 teaspoons of chopped fresh rosemary, and I've already done that. Just run my knife through there a little bit more, and then I just toss that into my mortar and pestle here, and then I add a teaspoon of not a teaspoon, a clove of minced garlic, and then I add a teaspoon and a half of ground pepper. Now I use coarse ground pepper, but you could use fine ground pepper. And then I use 2.5 teaspoons of kosher salt. And then I add to that 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And then I just mix that up. And I just really crush it well, because you want to release the oils out of the rosemary. So give that a good press. Oh, it smells so good. I just love the smell of rosemary. Now, once that's done, then we'll just scoop that out, and I'll rub that all over the roast. Now this is just a 3 pound, 2.5 actually this one, but I usually do about a 3 pound roast, and just get it all over inside, all sides. And then once that's done, then what I do is I just put some cellophane over top of it, or if you have a container that has a lid, then you're just going to put that over top, and you're going to then just put that in the fridge overnight. So So now the other recipe that I'm going to make this weekend is a slow cooker Italian wedding soup. And so when I make that, I make up the meatballs the night before. And because I'm going to do the work, if I'm going to make the meatballs, I'm going to make enough meatballs to make 2 batches of that soup. And so I'll make the meatballs up and I'll save half of them for the soup that I'm going to use tomorrow, and the other half I'll put in a container and I'll put them in the freezer and I'll save them for another time. And then when I go to make that Italian wedding soup again, it's easy. The meatballs are already done. I'm just going to throw it all the rest of the ingredients in my slow cooker. So what I have here is 2 pounds of ground beef. And to that, I'm going to add some chopped fresh parsley. And so I usually add about 1/2 cup, and I use the stems and I use the leaves. So I've already chopped that up. If you don't have access to chopped fresh parsley, that's fine. You can leave it out. I've left it out in the past. But if you have it, it's nice to add it to the meatballs. And then I add 1/2 cup of freshly ground Parmesan cheese. And then I add 1/2 cup of breadcrumbs. Now, what I do, how I get my breadcrumbs is I just save any old bread and I blend it up in my blender and food processor, and then I store my breadcrumbs in my freezer so that I have them. But you could buy store-bought breadcrumbs as well. And then I add a teaspoon of basil. It's a little bit more than a teaspoon. Oh, two teaspoons, that's right, it's a double batch. 2 teaspoons. And 2 teaspoons of dried oregano. So dried basil and dried oregano. And then I add 1 teaspoon of regular table salt. And 1 teaspoon of fine ground pepper. And then I'm going to mix that up. And once that's mixed up, then I'm going to make some meatballs that are, you want, in Italian wedding soup, you want small meatballs. So, and that's the reason why I like to make a double batch of this, because it will take a little bit more time to make your meatballs up. And so if you're going to be doing it, you might as well make enough for 2 soups. So that's all nice and stirred up. And so you see how nice that is. So I'm just going to mix that up. And so I'll form my meatballs, and then I'm going to put them on a parchment paper lined baking tray. And I like to do that because it makes for an easier cleanup. And so that's how I do it. And see how it's nice and small that meatball is. You can even make them smaller if you like. And then once all of those meatballs are formed, you're going to put it into a 350-degree oven, and you're going to roast them for 10 to 15 minutes. You're going to watch them closely because you don't want them to burn, but you know, you'll cook them for 10 to 15 minutes till they're nice and brown. And you can stir them once if you would like. And then you're going to take them out of the oven and you're going to cool them completely and then put them in the fridge overnight. So I'm just going to keep on making these meatballs here. Okay, so my meatballs are about ready to come out of the oven, so I'm just going to grab them out of the oven. They've been cooking for 15 minutes. I gave them a little bit of a stir. And so here are my meatballs that I'm going to use tomorrow in my Italian wedding soup. I'm just going to cool those completely and then store them in the fridge overnight. I'm back. So the other day I showed you how to put a nice rosemary, garlic, rub on a sirloin roast to prepare it for barbecuing the next day. And so we barbecued our roast yesterday, and we had it for dinner with some nice easy homemade oven fries and a little side of vegetables, and it was just an excellent dinner. Now, I like to serve my roast beef with a little homemade rosemary chimichurri sauce as well, and so I also had that on my roast beef dinner. So if you're interested in that recipe, it is on the website under the meats, beans, and eggs section, and so take a look if you would like to try making that roast beef recipe. Now, I sliced some of that up for lunch today, and I'm going to put that on a sandwich with some nice homemade pickled peppers. Now, I love to pickle peppers in the fall so that I can use them in recipes in the winter, and when I do get a chance to barbecue a roast, they make excellent sandwich pickles. They also are excellent if you just want to make a quick appetizer with just a little crostini with goat cheese, and just top it with a little sliver of roasted pickled peppers. Now, I do two types generally. I make some sweet pickled peppers, and I pickle those in white wine vinegar, some garlic, and some olive oil. And now this jar is packed. This will last weeks in my fridge. And so, but it's getting to be that time where I like to put my pickled peppers, even though I'll put them on hot dogs. So it's time to open up another jar of those. Now, I also pickle some hot peppers, and I pickle my hot peppers in cider vinegar, and I throw in a few sweet peppers, but I generally put my serranos, jalapenos, habaneros, and some hot banana peppers as well. And it makes a really pretty jar, and if you're into gift giving when you're making your canning, this is an excellent gift to give away with all those pretty colors. So now that we've talked about the roast, I'm going to move on to the slow cooker Italian wedding soup that I'm making today. Now, I already roasted the meatballs, and we prepared that earlier in the video, and I took half of those meatballs and I put them in the freezer for use for making that soup at a later date. And I saved half of the meatballs here to go into the soup today. So it's really easy to throw this soup together, and I'm starting a little late with this. It's noon now, so I'm going to put my soup on high, and so I'm going to put all my ingredients in the pot, and I'm going to cook it on high for about 6 hours total. So first I'm going to add 6 cups of turkey or chicken broth. Now, I just roasted a turkey the other day, so I'm going to use my turkey broth. So I'm going to use 6 cups of broth. Then I'm going to add a cup of chopped celery, and chop that fine. Now, I like to use celery. I like to have a lot of celery in my soup, so I use a whole cup, but you could use anywhere between a half a cup and a cup of chopped fresh celery. Then I add 3/4 cup of chopped carrot, and I also chop that finely. And then I add a half a cup of chopped onion, and also chopped finely. Then I'm going to add my meatballs. And then I add 2 bay leaves for flavor, extra flavor, and a teaspoon and 1/4 to 1.5 teaspoons of ground garlic. Then I add a 1/4 teaspoon of ground pepper. And then the other ingredient that I like to add is some Parmesan rind. So if you like to grind your own Parmesan, save the rind at the end of the Parmesan wedge and put it in a plastic bag, and either store it in your fridge or store it in your freezer, because the rind in soups gives a really nice depth of flavor to your soup. So it gives a really nice umami to your soup. So I always add that to this soup because Parmesan cheese is how I will serve it. I'll serve this soup with a topping of Parmesan cheese, so it's just excellent to add the rind for extra flavor while it's cooking. So then I'm going to put the lid on, and I'm going to set that on high for about 5 hours. Now my meatballs are partially cooked, and really all you're doing is cooking the flavor and getting all the spices and everything to cook the flavor through. And so I'm going to cook that on high for about 4 to 5 hours. I'll test the vegetables after 4 hours and see whether they're the right firmness that I like in my soup. And after that period, then you're going to add spinach, and usually I add 2 to 3 cups of fresh spinach, but I don't have any of the fresh spinach in the house right now, so I'm going to use frozen. So I took out a block of spinach, and I'm just thawing it here on my counter, and by the time the soup is by the time I'm ready to add the spinach to the soup, that spinach will be thawed. If it's not quite thawed, I might pop it in the microwave and just thaw it a little bit in the microwave first before adding it to the soup. So I'll add that whole block to the soup, and I'll also add 1/3 of a cup of small pasta. Now you want to use small pasta in this Italian wedding soup because you really want it to be a brothy soup. So you don't want to add a big pasta because the pasta will just suck up all the broth. And so just use 1/3 of a cup of small pasta when you're adding it to your Italian wedding soup. So when that soup is about 1 hour from being done, then I will add these last 2 ingredients. So if I got up earlier and I wanted to get this on in the slow cooker earlier, I would cook it on high or on low for about 7 or 8 hours and then add the last 2 ingredients at the very end. But like I said, I'm a little bit behind today, so I'm putting it on high. Well, I think that's all I have to say about the soup. I'm going to have my roast beef sandwich now.